I got it.
Look at that.
On page Hayamad Bayes,
all the way on the bottom.
where the thing is over here with the line. Oh, the last line?
Right here.
All right.
Okay, Kalman, we're starting. Okay. You coming?
The Gemara's are here. We have a Gemara's over here.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Daf Vav in Masechta Chagiga. It had said in the Mishnah that it had said in the Mishnah we're discussing the mitzvah of bringing a carbon riyah, really the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, right? All the three Yom Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. All Jewish males have a chiyuv to go, a responsibility to go up to the Beis Hamikdash to be seen by Hashem. It also says that when they're seen by Hashem, they have to bring with them various different karbanos, riyah, a chagiga, and perhaps maybe also a shlomim for their simcha. There's basically two, potentially three karbanos one must bring, as well as whatever other karbanos throughout the year a person has sort of dedicated, and now he's coming up and he's bringing up a caravan of animals to take care of all of his obligations throughout the year. So the Mishnah had told us that just like all mitzvahs that are in the Torah, a cheresh, a deaf person, a shota, a person who's mentally incapacitated, and a katan is someone under the bar mitzvah age. Let's say he's a boy, he's patur from one mitzvah and the worst Torah. It said in the Mishnah, however, a katan would be chayev because of the din of chinuch, meaning a father has a responsibility to educate his child, and we understand that to mean that for various different mitzvahs, there's a different age. So maybe for tefillin, it might be 6 months, a year before his bar mitzvah. For other mitzvahs, it'll be when he's younger. Yama Kashma Yisrael, maybe when he's even younger. Depending upon what age the boy is, a father's responsibility to teach his child will adjust. So what about the mitzvah of Re'iyah? There's a mitzvah of chinuch. How is one to be mechanech his child when it comes to the mitzvah of Re'iyah? So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue, how old does the child need to be in order for there to be a responsibility on the father to do this mitzvah of chinuch? Beis Shammai said he has to be old enough, the son has to be old enough that if the father were to put him on his shoulders and he can make the trek from the outskirts of Yerushalayim up to the Har Habayis. If you can make that trip, then the halach would be that the son is old enough that the chinuch is relevant, and therefore the father would have to bring him. Whereas Beis Hillel argues, and is makel as he generally is, and says that no, the boy could be slightly older. It's not enough that he has to be able to go on his shoulders. It's enough that he has to be able to hold his father's hand and walk. So he basically has to have the ability to walk. That's their machlekes in the Mishnah. So the Gemara now on that statement of the Mishnah is asking the following question. Maskifla, fourth last word on the page. Maskifla, Reb Zeira has a question. Flipping over here, 1 second. I don't know which one. I have a notes on some page here. There we are. Maskifla, Reb Zeira, Adhocha man asya. So this question, these 4 words seem very simple, but it's actually a little more complicated. So I'm going to try to explain it nice and simple. The Gemara is bothered. There's a machlekes in the Mishnah, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and they're saying that mitzvah of chinuch, which by the way will apply to all Jews, all males, and even those living outside of Yerushalayim.
What is chinuch?
The mitzvah of educating your son, education of your son. The mitzvah of chinuch, like chanoch lenar al pidarko, it means you teach a kid in his own path so that when he gets older, he'll be able to do mitzvahs. So it says over here in the Mishnah that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing about what level of maturation the child has in terms of his ability to get from the outskirts of Yerushalayim to the Har Habayis, to the Beis Hamikdash. So the question is was the mitzvah only said to those who live in Yerushalayim? What if you lived outside of Yerushalayim, right? And the question then becomes, obviously it was said not only to those in Yerushalayim. If it was said to those people outside Yerushalayim, there's just a practical question here, which is, how can Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel be arguing about how old the kid is in terms of his ability to travel from outside of Yerushalayim to the Azara? How did he get from Meron to Yerushalayim? He obviously had the ability to do that, which means more than likely, the child is clearly older than whatever age they're discussing. There's no practical scenario where they could actually have an argument that's relevant, because the child would have to be able to get from wherever he is anyways to Yerushalayim, which let's just say, Beis Shammai says you got to be 1 year old, and Beis Hillel says you got to be 2 years old. Well, to get from Meron to Yerushalayim, you got to be 5 years old. So who cares that they're arguing about 1 and 2? The only scenario where you'll ever have a kid who's even sitting in Yerushalayim is if he's old enough to make it there. If he's old enough to make it there, he's clearly at least 2 years old, if not older. So ask the Gemara, Ad Hachaman Asya, that you're having an argument about Yerushalayim. The Gemara answer is nice and simple. Well, you're jumping ahead. Amarle, Abaye says, very simple, Ad Hacha de Mechayve Ema B'Simcha, since up until Yerushalayim, the mother has a chiyuv. Why does the mother have an obligation to go? Because there's another mitzvah. There's a mitzvah of Simchas Yontiv, which even though the mother, is not chayiv to go to the Beis Hamikdash for the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel or to bring a korban re'iyah, she is chayiv to be b'simcha and yantif. And it's clear from the Gemara what that means, is that she has to partake in the suda, in the meal of the korban meat. I mean, she has a responsibility to eat that meat.
She's chayiv in the midst of dinner.
It's a good question. So machlekes rishonim, it's a discussion on the Gemara. But for our sake, we're going to assume that the reason why she's coming is in order to be chayiv, mekayim the mitzvah of simcha. So since she anyways has to go and be at least in Yerushalayim, why in Yerushalayim? Why does she have to stop there? Because once you're in Yerushalayim, you can be mekayim the mitzvah. Why? Because if the way you're mekayim the mitzvah is by eating the korban, well, we're talking about eating a korban. That means we're talking about a shlamim, which is one of the peace offering, which is one of the types of karbanos that you're allowed to eat. Those were only allowed to be eaten inside the city of Yerushalayim. You're not allowed to eat it outside Yerushalayim. So she had an obligation to trek all the way into Yerushalayim. Once she's there, and she's obviously brought her child with him, so that's how he got there, which means he could be arriving at 6 months. He could be arriving at a year. He could be arriving at 2 years. He could be arriving at whatever age he is. Now, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have an argument. At that point, they're sitting in the apartment above whatever it is, Eish Torah, and the father says, all right, I'm going to go do my mitzvah aliyah l'regel. Should I schlep the kid with me or not? Beis Shammai says, how old is he? Can he make the trek on your shoulders? Take him. Beis Hillel says no, unless he can walk with you holding his hand from wherever you are until the Azar.
Why do you have to say his mother did it? How can his father do it?
It's not about who did or didn't.
Yeah, but why do you switch it? I'm going to buy it.
No. So the question, if I understand what you're asking, what you mean is why does the mother have to come at all?
No, I know she's having me simcha.
Uh-huh.
But if the halacha is when his father can walk him, what does Gemara gain by telling us that his mother took him?
Well, the assumption, I mean, again, keeping it simple, the assumption is that a child needs his mother more than he needs his father, and therefore the trek will be easier. Wow. There's a little bit more of a complicated answer, which has what to do with nursing, meaning to say that if we're talking about a child that needs his mother for nursing, so up until 2 years old, we assume the child's being nursed. So since his child's being nursed up until 2 years old, this is the way Rashi formulates the question. The way Rashi formulates it is that if we're talking about where the mother's staying home, then the kid by definition has to be above 2 years old, because it means that he's no longer nursing. If he's no longer nursing, then he's already above the age that Beis Shammai. That's how Rashi says it. It gets complicated in the Gemara. That's why I didn't want to mention it, but the question is a fair question.
Also, the father has to carry the suitcases. That's the job he got.
Right. Discussion in the Rishonim is the Gemara mashma over here. I mean, some want to say that ad hachaman asya is a raya. It implies that the mitzvah has to be done beregel. Meaning, because what do you mean? Maybe the answer is they put him in a crib or whatever, in a car seat, shoved him in a wagon, and that's how they got there. And then once they got there, the question, it seems from the question that no, you had to literally walk, which is it's a big chiddush.
Most people didn't have cars.
That's true. Most people didn't have cars. In Eretz Yisrael, even nowadays, most people don't have cars. I mean,
part of the road.
Could be. Okay. So either way. So Gemara says, Ad hachaman asya, okay, the mother brought him. Maybe b'simcha, I see se'ema, the mother brought him. Mikan ve'el, once you get to Yerushalayim, im yachol alos lechos biyadav shel aviv, mi Yerushalayim laharabayas, if he could hold his father's hand. And again, the Gemara isn't going to mention both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, it's going to mention Beis Hillel, but this would be true in Beis Shammai also, on his shoulders. Chayev ve'ilai pater. Okay, so that's the explanation of the Gemara. Heishiv Rebbe Tachas Beis Hillel. So again, so we have Machlokes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, exactly how old the child needs to be for his father to have the obligation to do chinuch with him, to educate him, to bring him to Yerushalayim.
Abaya says elsewhere, it says here in the commentary that the woman is not hired.
Yeah, so it's another discussion. A lot of the Rishonim ask on this from this Gemara. It's mashma that Abaya holds that the woman has her own chiyuv, whereas Abaya in other places seems to be imply that a woman's chiyuv doesn't exist, and rather the only reason why she might be chayiv is if her husband has a chiyuv simcha, which he does, and the way he's misameach her is by buying her a dress, jewelry, and stuff like this. So therefore, she would have to come to help him be mekayim his mitzvah,
to be part of it.
To be part of the mitzvah.
It's like Peri
Veribia. They say it by sukkah also. They say Teshvu Kein Teduro. A person has to sleep in the sukkah on sukkahs. If we live in Eretz Yisrael, let's say, where it's the minig is like that, right? I mean, some people do it here also. So the halacha is some people say you have a patur. What's the patur? Because since it's Teshvu Kein Teduro, that you have to do the mitzvah the same way you would do it in the house. And in the house, you sleep in a bedroom where your wife sleeps. Your wife doesn't want to go out to the sukkah. She's not chayiv to sit in the sukkah. But maybe she would have a chiyuv to sleep in the sukkah, not because she has a mitzvah, because you have a mitzvah. Maybe she's schlepped into your mitzvah. Same thing over here could be. That's how some of them get around the question. Okay. So Heishiv Rebbe Tachas Beis Hillel. So Rebbe asked the kasha on Beis Shammai, meaning he's coming to the defense of Beis Hillel's opinion that it's the older age. So just to make it simple, so that I'm not confusing people, we'll say that Beis Shammai's age is 1, and we'll say Beis Hillel age is 2. Yeah, okay. So Heishiv Rebbe Tachas Beis Hillel. He is defending the opinion of 2. and saying Lidiv Rebbe Shammai that Yechayiv already once your son is 1 year old. V'chana loy also the pasuk says Shmuel. Chana had a child. There was Shmuel Hanavi. Right, Chana was married to a man named Elkanah. Elkanah was going to do the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel, and he said, "Honey, we're leaving. Let's go. I want to take the kids. We're going to Aliyah L'Regel." V'chana loy also. She says, "I'm not going." Ki Amr L'Isha. She said to her husband, "Ad yigom alanar." Until he's finished being weaned, the heavy Yosef, and then we'll take him. So what's the problem here? The Gemara, and I don't know where the Gemara gets this. It's a little bit difficult. The Shmuel, the Yachal Lirkav al Kseifa shall aviv have. The understanding in the Gemara here is that he was. What's that?
Right after Yunus is too young to walk.
No, but
that's Shmuel's kasha.
No, but so Rashi's clear that once someone is finishing nursing, he already falls into the category of being able to walk on his own, holding his father's hand.
They're weaned at 2.
Weaned at 2, and 2 years old is assumed. That's why I picked 1 and 2. He could walk. So this is a huge kasha on Rashi. I'm saying what you're saying is a valid point, and it's a problem that the Achronim ask on Rashi. But for our purposes, we'll say it's like this. The Gemara is saying like this: Shmuel must have been 1.5 years old. That's the way the Gemara is formulating this question. Why? Because he clearly was still nursing, which means he had to be less than 2. But and again, this I don't know where the Gemara get. Why couldn't it be 6 months? I mean, why can't Beis Shammai say he was very, very young and he couldn't even go on his shoulders? That I don't know.
He wouldn't have asked.
He wouldn't have. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Elkanah wouldn't have asked.
Obviously, the baby that
Yeah, okay.
He must have had some kind of Elkanah must have had a sense of I should bring him.
Could be, yeah, could be he was asking out the woman. Could be he was saying to her, "Come, we have to go be Mekayim mitzvah simcha." Right, we have to go be Mekayim mitzvah simcha, so you have to come, and obviously you're going to bring the baby because you can't leave without the baby.
You're going to go.
That was her response. Her response was, "He's too young. I can't take him."
Yeah, correct.
It's fair.
I mean, we'll get to it in the Gemara.
You can answer from Rashi that the kasha that you're asking is fair because he wouldn't have asked.
Yeah, but why would he have Mimanashach? I'm saying if you hold like Beis Hill, why would he ask either? Meaning, either way you go, we're guessing how old he was. We don't have any proof that how old he was. So right. To me, it's almost like how do I know that Avram Avinu wore a hat? Because when it says when he went outside, how do you think Avram Avinu went outside without a hat? I mean, it's not a raya. It's we're making assumptions. There's nothing in the pasuk that says he was 6 months, a year. Either way. Okay. So the Gemara says like this: Amar le Abaye. They changed the gear. So 1 second. So what's your question here? That's what I'm saying is really what the Gemara is about to do, right? So what is the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying they changed the gears to Abaye. Oh. So the question was asked to Abaye. So he responded by saying, "So what's your question?" The question is, you have a problem with Beis Shammai's opinion that he holds that you're chayiv once he's 1 year old, and we're assuming Shmuel was at least 1, and therefore, why didn't he have a chiyuv to go? Why didn't the father have a chiyuv to go? Amarle Abaye ula taimech tikshi loch Chana gufa. Why didn't Chana go? Why would she have to go? Miloi mechayva b'simcha. Doesn't she have the mitzvah of simcha? And Elamai, what are you going to say? Elachana mifankusa yiserta chazi baby Shmuel. She must have seen something in Shmuel that he was a little weak as a baby, and therefore the chasha baby Shmuel, the chulsha da'archa, she was nervous for the trip. Well, once she was already concerned that he wouldn't be able to handle the trip, that'll exempt her from her own mitzvah simcha, but it'll also exempt him from the mitzvah of chinuch. So therefore, that's why he didn't bring it. So there's no kasha and Beis Shammai from there. Okay, fine. That's conversation 1 over. By Reb Shimon had the following question. So we're talking about a katan. Remember, a katan, the only chiyuv you'll have is because of chinuch under the age of 13. The father will have to bring him in order for him to learn. Katan, chiger, who cannot walk. Now, we learned earlier that an adult who is a chiger is pater. An adult who is lame. Let's say a person broke both his ankles. He got, crossed over by Steph Curry, and he literally can't make the trip. He's hanging out in his house. So he's pater from the mitzvah of re'iyah, because the Torah, when it's talking about re'iyah, says regalim. Regalim says legs. Legs means you have to walk. If you don't have good function of your legs, you're pater. That's what we learned earlier. Okay. Ask the Gemara, what if you have a katan who also broke his legs? So does the father have a chiyuv to take him with him or not? Meaning, on the one hand, he has a chiyuv to do chinuch. On the other hand, this katan, if he would be an adult, he'd be pater. Right? So ask the Gemara like this. L'divrei Beis Shammai, Katan chiger l'divrei Beis Shammai, that'll only be relevant according to Beis Shammai, because according to Beis Hillel, remember, Beis Hillel holds the opinion is you have to hold your son's hands. So if he's a chiger, as a katan, he obviously is going to be pater because the son can't walk on his own. But according to Beis Shammai, you carry him on his shoulders, so who cares if he doesn't have function of his legs? The mitzvah of chinuch is to put him on your shoulders. Visuma, and someone who's blind, l'divrei shneim, a blind person can walk and a blind person can be put on his shoulders, so that's going to be a question on both of them, because again, a regular adult who's blind is going to be pater. What about a katan who's blind? Does a father have to take his blind son who can walk or can go on the shoulders, each one of them? Ask the Gemara Mahu. It's not a kasha, it's a question. What's the halacha in that situation? Clarification. Thank you. So Heichi Dami, the Gemara's bothered. First, 1 second. Let me clarify. What are you asking? Ilema, if you're saying it's a permanent injury, this will never get better. Meaning, this kid, when he gets older, will also not be able to walk, right? Visuma, and it's a blind person. She'eno yachal hispasech. He's blind from the day he was born. It's not like it's a temporary blindness. So then, hashta gadol pater. If you're telling me if we snapped our fingers and made him a gadol, he'd be pater. Katan mi boy. There's even a discussion that when he's a baby, he should be chayiv. Because again, think about it. What's the mitzvah of chinuch? The mitzvah of chinuch, simple understanding. You're preparing him for when he's older. But if this kid's never going to be able to do the mitzvah when he's a bar mitzvah, there's no reason to.
Yeah.
Gemara says, "Lo tzricha." You're right. What's my question? We're talking about a scenario that, and here it doesn't mean he's for sure going to get better, but there's a possibility he can get better. Meaning within a derech hateva, we're not talking about where he doesn't have any eyeballs and he's going to magically have eyeballs. We're talking about that for whatever reason he's got very blurry vision right now as a kid. But the doctor says, listen, there's a 50-50 chance that he's going to be able to see when he gets older. So now what's the halacha? Do we say, and we'll see it inside in a second, but I'm going to say it outside just so conceptually, yeah? Do we say right now, if he was an adult, he'd be pater? But when he gets older, he's going to need to know what to do. So really the question of the Gemara is, in the mitzvah of chinuch, how do we view it? Is my responsibility primarily preparing him for the future, which is the way we would assume, or is the responsibility that I have a son and it's not right for my son to be 12 years old and not doing any mitzvahs? So with the Rabbanon, they said, we got to get our kids doing mitzvahs at an earlier age. Is there a benefit that he'll know what to do when he gets older? Sure, but that's not the primary reason. The primary reason is I want to make sure that all the kids in my house are doing mitzvahs. And so midrabanan, even though in Torah I don't have responsibility until I'm 13, we wanted our kids to do mitzvahs even at a younger age. And again, both things are true. It's just the Gemara seems to be addressing which one is the primary mover. And depending upon that, will come out the question. If the real reason is preparing him for the future, then I have a chiyuv to give him chinuch now. Maybe he'll see when he gets older. Maybe he'll walk when he gets older. But if my primary reason is right now he's got to do a mitzvah, well, right now he's pater. Because right now he can't walk, he can't see. Gemara says like this. Let's read it inside. Amar Abaye. Oh, sorry. Actually, no, the Gemara doesn't speak it out, so it's good I spoke it out. Amar Abaye, Abaye answers, Kol heicha de gadol mechayev midaraisa katanami mechachin alei midarabanan. He says, at any moment that we would say, had he been a gadol, he'd be chayev min haTorah, a katan is also chayev midarabanan. Then kol heicha de gadol pater midaraisa, meaning like these guys who can't walk or can't see, midarabanan katanami pater. So Abaye is answering that at least when it comes to chinuch, what we're saying is that it's not primarily about preparing him for the future. It's about in this moment right now, is he chayiv in mitzvahs or not? And let's just quickly review the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we have been discussing up until now the mitzvah of going up to Yerushalayim to be seen by Hashem. Then the end of the Mishnah discussed the karbanos. We talked about a carbon re'iyah, which is an ola. An ola, remember, is something that's burnt up completely on the mizbeach, and really we don't eat anything from it. The kohen doesn't eat anything from it. The only thing that is not burnt into ashes are the skins of the animal, which the kohen gets. I don't exactly know what he does with it, but whatever it is, the point is that's what he gets. They use it for, maybe they give it to their wife for furs. I have no clue, whatever. So the point is like this. Shlamim, the other type of carbon, a peace offering, the whole purpose of a peace offering is to eat it, right? We said before, you can eat it anywhere inside the vicinity of Yerushalayim. So now there are two major karbanos one brings every yontif. The carbon re'iyah, which is an ola. So the re'iyah is an olas re'iyah, completely burnt, and you bring it when you go to visit the Beis HaMikdash. Separately, there's a mitzvah of a chagiga. The chagiga is a shlamim. That chagiga is eaten. You eat it. It's meat. You shecht it. You roast it. It's like a barbecue.
And only what we say for one day afterwards.
So you got that day, the night, and then the day after, and then after that, leftovers is chayv karetz. So the Mishnah said, what is the minimum I must spend on that animal?
Still 2 months.
So there's two. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue. Beis Shammai says, I have to spend more money on the olas re'iyah and less money on the carbon chagiga. So the animal that I'm burning up completely, that's considered a holier carbon, and therefore I have to spend more money. The minimum
more money and you can't even eat it.
Yeah. Oh. So you obviously hold like Beis Hillel.
God gets the better.
Oh, so I'm done a movie. It's amazing. Yeah. So Beis Shammai says of the two karbanos, the one that's completely burnt up, which is a very holy carbon, that you can't spend less than, let's say, $200 on. Whereas the one that we're all going to eat, which is a lower level of kedusha, that you can even spend only $100 on. Whereas Beis Hillel says the opposite, pretty much for the same argument you made. What do you mean? this is a carbon I need to eat. Not only is it something that I actually have to have benefit from, but I have to give some to Hashem, I got to give some to the Kain, I have to eat, I got to feed my family. So shouldn't it be that that animal has to be more expensive because it needs to be a bigger animal, got to feed more people? Makes a lot of sense. So that's what Beisol says. Beisol says that the carbon that you use for your Chagiga can't be less than $200, whereas the Ola, which is completely burnt up, that could be $100 because it's anyways not going to feed anyone. That's the effective argument. Let's see it inside. Tan Rabban. The Brisa says, and sort of fleshes out this argument with a little more detail. Beishamai oimrim hareiyah, again, the Ola, the one that's completely burnt up, shtei kesef, 2 pieces of silver, $200. Ve'achagiga, the one that's eaten, ma'a kesef, $100. Yeah, and that ma'a there is not meya, that's
Right.
ma'a. But for our sake, we're gonna. It's a ma'a kesef is it's less than 2.
One.
Well, don't shekel. Shekel's a different thing. Ma'a kesef, we'll just say for our sake
Less
here,
money.
1 piece of silver. And shtei kesef is 2 pieces of silver. That's really the best way to think about it. Okay? Shahariya, unless we're going to start going cryptocurrencies and trying to figure out exactly how to work it, it's going to get too complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Shahari,
Meaning it's double.
it is double.
It's double.
The ratio
Yeah,
is
one
true.
double.
The
Yeah.
ratio is true. So Beishamai holds the one that's burnt up completely. The carbon re'iyah is shtei kesef, 2 pieces. Ve'chagiga ma kesef, $100. Shahariya oila kula lagavoya. It's a carbon ola. Like I said before, it's completely burnt up, and that, according to Beis Shammai, is in and of itself the reason why it deserves to be paid more for.
Got it.
Because since it's entirely burnt up LaHashem, that's considered. And by the way, just to sort of point out, there are different categories of karbanos. Most karbanos all karbanos fit into one of these 2 categories. There's something called koche kochim, holy ones, and koche kalim, holy, not so holy ones. Meaning there's different levels.
of kashrus.
Ola, yeah, it's like glat and let's say Rabbanut Yerushalayim, whatever. So you have let's say like Chalav Yisrael, which would be let's say like an oila and a chatos and an ashim. These are koche kochim, and koche kalim like shlamim basically are going to be there. That works. That's not bad. I like that.
Cautious.
There we go.
There you go.
And my grandfather says, yeah. Okay. So
Over shalom.
like exactly. Shari'ah ola kula lagavos. So since it's burnt up entirely, that's a holy type of carbon. Therefore, you can't spend less than $200 on it. Masha ain't bechagiga, where it's not completely burnt up, it's kachei kalim, and therefore you can spend less money on it. Then he gives a second reason. Matzinu ba'atzeres on Shavuos. If you look in the psukim by Shavuos, there are many korbanos that are brought on Shavuos. However, of those korbanos, sheribo behen hakasav be'olos yosim b'shlamim, a significantly a greater amount of those korbanos are brought up as completely burnt up, whereas the ones that are shlamim are fewer. And so since more of them are olos, for some reason that's a raya that olos are more important, better.
Challah shlamim?
Challah.
That was put on them.
No, lechem hapanim is the lechem hapanim is bread, but it went along with a lot of other animal karbanos. Those animal karbanos were primarily olos and not shlamim, and therefore because
did the
that's
Kohanim eat the bread or
yes,
not?
they
ate the bread. Okay.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be delicious.
Are the 70 bulls that are offered?
That's
are they
on
those
Sukkot, you mean?
on Sukkot, they're all olos.
No. It's a split. There's olos, shlamim, both. Yeah. But here we're talking about Shavuos. Shavuos is different.
Right.
Shavuos we're talking about.
Yeah.
Atzeres is Shavuos, not Shmini Atzeres. Maybe across. But Shmini Atzeres is only 1 carbon. But anyway, okay. So Beis Hillel oimrim hari'iyah ma'a kesef hachiga shtei kesef. He goes the other way. That the one that's completely burnt up only has to pay $100, but the one that you're eating, that's $200. Why? Shechagiga yeshna lifnei adibur. Because if you look in the Chumash, you'll see historically we were already bringing chagigas even before Matan Torah. And that's something special about a chagiga. It's that old OG type of carbon that goes all the way back. Therefore, that's the type of carbon that we're going to say that's considered chashiv. Don't spend less than $200 on it. Masha enkin b're'iyah. We never started bringing the carbon in re'iyah only once we started having a Beis Hamikdash, let's say. And since we only had a Beis Hamikdash, or maybe a Mishkan, we'll see the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, that came much later. You didn't have an olas re'iyah in the midbar. The Ode, a second reason. Matzinu b'Nisiyim. So he has a different place in the Torah where you see korbanos. Nisiyim is by the Chanukas HaMishkan when we built the Mishkan for the first time. It is in Nasa, I think. But by the Nisiyim, Sheriba b'Hen HaKasuv b'Shlamim Yosmi b'Olos. Many korbanos were brought by the various different Nisiyim, right? The what's the English translation for Nisiyim? Princes. Thank you. Yeah. So each one of these Nisiyim would bring karbanos, and those karbanos were mostly shlamim, not so much olas. So therefore, you see that the Nisiyim were machshiv, let's say the shlamim more, or Hashem was machshiv the shlamim more there. So each one, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, are looking to history and also looking to the actual karbanos themselves in their qualitative state, which one fits more to say that you should be chayav to pay more money for it. So now the Gemara, as it's want to do, is going to be bothered. Well, why didn't you say like him? And why didn't you say like him? And then why didn't like say like him? Because I didn't say like him. Beis Hillel, remember, who says that the one that's burnt is less and the one that's eaten is more. My taima, loy amri ke Beis Shammai. Why not learn like Beis Shammai? Or Beis Shammai put forth some pretty good reasons. The ka'amris re'iyah adifa de oila kula legavoya. He says this that you said that the re'iyah is better because it's burnt up completely. You think that's a maila? That's not a maila. Adarabba. Chagiga adifa the isba shtei achilas. Like he was saying, I have 2 achilas. I got to feed a big family with my chagiga. So that's got to be a bigger animal. It makes more sense that it should be a more expensive animal. Whereas the ola, which is completely burnt up, what's the difference if I'm burning up an ounce, 2 ounces, a pound? Doesn't make a difference. It's all getting burnt up anyways. Is Hashem so makbid? I mean, he doesn't like. Anyways, doesn't make a difference to him, right?
We spend a lot of money on a small amount also.
Yeah, it's also true.
More, like per
Exactly.
pounds.
Udika amris nail of matzeres, and Beis Shammai's argument that if I look to Shavuos, I see that all the karbanos there are oilers more than shlamim. That doesn't matter. What is the carbon of Shavuos? That's a communal tzibur. That's a communal sacrifice. We're talking about re'iyah, which is an individual sacrifice. Done in carbon yachid, mi carbon yachid. I want to compare apples to apples, and I want to learn about a carbon re'iyah, which is a personal carbon. So I'm not going to go run to some communal carbon and see what they do over there. Rather, ve'ein done in carbon yachid, mi carbon tzibur, and therefore I like to look to the Nisiyim, which were private karbanos. Beis Shammai, who says that the ola is more expensive than the shlamim. My time aloi amri ki Beis Hillel. Why did his knee go the other way? The ka'amris chagiga, because Beis Hillel's whole argument was that a chagiga is adiva is better. Why? The yeshn lefnei adibur, because it was brought up before Matan Torah. Re'iyah nami yeshn lefnei adibur. He says there was a carbon re'iyah before Har Sinai. Where do you see that there was a re'iyah before Har Sinai? We'll see in the Gemara in a minute. So that's Beis Shammai's first response to Beis Hillel. And the second one is, you want to run to the priest by the Chanukas HaMishkan, they brought karbanos there and they were mostly shlamim. Don't bring, he also has an apples to apples problem. Meaning you want to bring me a raya from karbanos that were brought once and are never going to be brought again. Whatever we did there, who cares? That was whatever it was then. But now in the future, where we're going to have other karbanos brought every single day or every single yontiv, the carbon re'iyah, that's something that is generationally relevant. I therefore want to compare it to something like Shavuos, which is also generationally relevant. Okay. Vein done in davar hanoeg l'daros, v'davar she'eino noeg l'daros. Okay.
Yeah.
Part of the context here that we forget is that they couldn't eat meat for most of history, except by bringing a carbon. It was us to eat meat unless you brought a carbon.
15 minutes.
Right.
So it's like
20 minutes.
It was considered a chashuv.
20 minutes.
Okay, no, let's focus. Yeah.
Kevin, I'll do that myself. I gotta go to school.
Oh, okay.
Keep on.
Yeah, we're gonna go back. Listen, at Halavai, if we can have korban cotton every day, I'll take that. So now the Gemara is bothered. So we just clarified that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have their different opinions.
Yeah.
So now the question is, according to Beis Hillel, the part that Beis Shammai responded seems to be a good argument. Meaning, what did Beis Hillel say? The reason why I choose shlamim and chagiga over the olas re'iyah, in terms of which should be more expensive, is because the chagiga happened before Har Sinai, and the re'iyah did not happen before Har Sinai. Yeah? Okay. Beis Shammai responded by saying, no, that's not true. Even the carbon olas re'iyah happened before Har Sinai. So what are they arguing? The Metzias? What's the machlokes? Either it happened or it didn't happen. And that's exactly the argument. We'll see in a moment. What pasuk did you find that you found that there was a carbon chagiga before Har Sinai? And we'll read it inside because it's a good pasuk to read. It says, "Vayishlach es narei bnei Yisrael, v'ya'alu olos." They brought up olos. V'yizbechu zvachim shlamim, and they brought shlamim. LaHashem parim. They brought up cows. We'll see this pasuk on Amud Beis. So the pasuk here says that they brought up shlamim, and it's clear to the Beis Hillel for some reason that the shlamim here are a carbon chagiga. What's the carbon chagiga? The pasuk says later on. It also uses a lashon of chag, not in this pasuk, but in a different pasuk. Right when we were leaving Mitzrayim, and Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen said to Paro that we're going to need to leave here and go into the midbar to do chag. Right, Lizbah, and they said chag LaHashem.
Right.
They used the lashon of chag. So this carbon was referenced earlier as a chag, which means it's a chagiga. Therefore, Beis Hillel says that the carbon that was brought by Har Sinai was a chagiga. Just parenthetically, this pasuk is in Parshas Mishpatim, which is after Har Sinai in the sequence of the Parshias. Rashi here and in Shas in general and in Rashi's Shita is Ein Mukdam and Mu'uch LaTorah. We don't have the Torah in sequential order necessarily of what occurred.
In order, right?
The Ramban seems to say.
Right.
The Ramban seems to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could also say that he's saying the category of shlamim existed before, as opposed to.
But it's not clear.
Yeah.
It's not clear that the reason. let me say it this way. Beis Hillel is saying the reason why the Chagiga has to be more isn't because there were shlamim before. That you don't need to come on. He was saying it's because there was a Chagiga before and no Re'iyah before. Because the fact that there were Olas before, Beis Hillel is going to be masking to that this pasuk says there were Olas. The question is what type of Ola, what type of Chagiga, what type of shlamim. Yeah. So he says Re'iyah nami haksiv. The Gemara is asking, according to you, Beis Hillel, this same pasuk that tells you that there was a shlamim, which you say is a chagiga beforehand, there was also of this same pasuk says there were olos, and why not say that those olos were the olas re'iyah, right? Nami ksiv yalu olos, that exact same pasuk. So this is a question on Beis Hillel. Your whole reasoning is that there were shlamim before, that there were chagigas, and you know that because it says in the pasuk shlamim, which you understand to mean chagiga. So then how come you don't say that when it says olos in the pasuk, it's referring to olas re'iyah? It says there were olas.
How could be olas re'iyah if they're not that a base then?
So okay, so you have to. I mean, I'll say back to you. What's the chagiga? By Arsina, there's no gimel regalim. Elamai chagiga just means in front of Hashem. I'm celebrating HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So do over here. I'm by Arsina. Arsina is also. I'm praying Shechina.
So you can answer for both. They were both non-existent, and therefore you can.
Yeah, but then their whole reasoning goes out the window.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So obviously that's not the case. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are both acknowledging that those korbanos are relevant in this discussion of whether we're going to say which one's going to be more expensive.
So I would say that the precedent of Chag sounds like, meaning like it's celebrating, would make more sense. Maybe I'll be past
because we live in the world of Beis Hillel and Hanami. But Beis Shammai would say no. Maybe the Olas Riyah would be more take precedent.
You only hold back Beis Shammai twice in the Gemara ever.
More. Yal Kagam is the famous example, but there's other. But
I'm here. I was wrong.
I don't say
you're right.
You do hold like Beis Shammai.
You're right.
I don't say I'm saying Akishmara because celebrating you could say before, but Olas Riyah is dafka by the Beis Hamikdash. So
if you hold that the Olas Riyah is entirely dependent on the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel,
right?
If you understand that the mitzvah, of bringing up the carbon of bringing an Olas Riyah, right?
Yeah.
It'll be anytime there's a Riyah. Meaning,
so at the time of
time of Arsina, there was just as much of a Riyah there as there was maybe even more. Yeah.
So you would have to say that Mishpatim happened before.
Rashi
and, right, and it happened right then. No. According to Beis Shammai, it happened before.
Whatever you'll say, this is what I'm saying to you, and I think if you think about it, you'll understand it. If not, we can talk about it after. But whatever the timeline was for the Chagiga was exactly the same timeline for the Ola, because that the pasuk it's the same pasuk.
Right.
So whenever they brought the Ola, they brought the Shlomim.
Right.
So if the Shlomim is a Chagiga and we're okay with the timeline for the Chagiga, you got to be okay with the Ola, because it was all happening at the foot of the mountain. Let's say.
Let me add one point. He quotes, I don't know if he said this, he quotes Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, the last time
So that's what I was referencing. Yeah, that's what I was referencing by Mitzrayim. Yeah. Okay. Guys. Come this way, because I think you're all the way over there. I feel like you're already learning Yavanis. Come closer. Yeah, there we go. With all the noise over here, it's honestly very distracted.
Made a breakaway down.
So what's the question? Let's just say the question again. Question again, very simple. Beis Hillel's whole reasoning for the Shlomim being more expensive is the Shlomim existed by Har Sinai. Ask the Gemara, there was an Ola by Har Sinai. Say that was the Ola Sriya. So they're both by Har Sinai. So why'd you pick one over the other? Kisari Beis Hillel, no. Ola Sheikriva Yisrael b'Midbar. That Ola at the foot of the mountain was not an Ola Sriya. Ola's Talmud Havi. So he holds that the Talmud already started. And this is not so simple. To say that the Talmud started then, we generally understand the Talmud to be before the Mishkan even existed. It's a little bit difficult to say that also. Yeah. So as much as it's difficult to say that it was an Olas Re'iyah when there was no Beis Hamikdash, it's difficult to say there was an Olas Talmud. But again, it's the same difficulty. So whatever you'll answer for one, you'll answer for the other, or whatever you'll accept for one, you'll accept for the other. But Beis Hillel says you don't have a raya that the pasuk of that Ola was an Olas Re'iyah, therefore it didn't exist before Har Sinai, and therefore if I have to choose which one, the Shlomim of Chagiga or the Ola of Re'iyah is more, let's say, chashiv, that it deserves a higher cost, I'll say the Shlomim because I know for sure that was before, whereas I don't know the same thing for the Ola Re'iyah.
That's a little more difficult because, Re'iyah is a one-time thing. You don't have kind of the apparatus you need for Kabbalah, for the Mishkan. So to do it every day, Talmud, is a little more difficult.
So you're touching on an idea. Well, the Gemara is going to sort of touch on it, but you're touching on, I think, a more conceptual idea, which is, what is a Korban Talmud? If you bring a Korban Talmud once, have you brought a Korban Talmud?
Yes, I
mean, isn't Talmud by definition? Isn't it by definition only defined by the fact that it's in sequence and every day? So I mean, how could
once they start, they have to continue.
it's like if someone says I quit smoking, really you've never quit smoking until you die.
Quit on me today.
Right? Today you're not smoking. You're not smoking today. I did many years ago. Yeah, thank God. Shavasa B'Tamas. Shavasa B'Tamas 2009.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, Shavasa B'Tamas. I remember I broke my fast. I smoked the whole.
Impressive that you remember that.
Well, the day was
I don't
unique.
remember when I quit.
It was a fast day. I smoked basically like 3 packs the whole day to get through the day, not eating food. And then at the end of the day, I was so sick of smoking cigarettes all the day. I just was breaking my fast in Borough Park with some friends on some pizza. Done. Nah, I didn't smoke 3 packs. I'm saying I was smoking whatever it was. I wasn't paying attention. Either way, so the point of the Gemara is that Beis Hillel is saying that the Ola that was brought in the Beis Hamikdash, by Har Sinai, was an Olas Tamid, not an Olas Re'iyah. So therefore, since it was an Olas Tamid and not an Olas Re'iyah, I don't have a Re'iyah before Har Sinai. So if I have to choose between a Chagiga and a carbon Re'iyah, I'll choose Chagiga as being the more expensive one. Ubeis Shammai Savri Ola Shikruvi Yisrael B'Midbar Olas Re'iyah, and he holds the opposite. He holds that no, the Ola that was there was an Olas Re'iyah. Therefore, he can't choose between either one. He agrees there's a Chagiga and an Olas Re'iyah, but for separate reasons, he says, I pick the what do you call it? He says that since an Ola is completely burnt up and the Shlomim is not completely burnt up, I'm going to choose the Ola over the Shlomim. Therefore, the Ola is going to be the more expensive one, and the Shlomim is going to be the cheaper one. Okay, so that's the Machlekes B'Sham Beis Hillel. Amar Abaye.
Very nice into the Truma, the best of the best of the best. You know, because you're saying there's different rankings within.
Well, that's certainly true by the Dovas. That's definitely the case.
For bonus with Davis, so I don't think like it's similar because it's supposed to.
I mean, if we're talking about Ola and Shlamim, it depends. If it's an obligatory, if it's a chiyuv, then there's very specific halachas. If it's optional, meaning if it's voluntary.
More like I think both of them are like for mechap.
Oh yeah. Ola and Shlamim, it's interesting.
Sacrifice, right?
They're both, but they're both not a kapara, really. Generally speaking, they're not a kapara because a kapara is typically a chatas and an osham. But either way, Amar Abaye says, we just got through this whole conversation saying that Beis Shammai Beis Hillel argue what was the Ola brought at the foot of Har Sinai. Beis Shammai says it was an Olas Re'iyah. Beis Hillel says, no, it was an Olas Tamid. Now we're going to see, Abaye says that machlek has really raged through the years. Amar Abaye, Beis Shammai, Rebbe Lozer, who's Talmud, Rebbe Shmuel, Kulu, Sfir Lahu, Ola Shikuv Yisrael, Midbar, Olas Re'iyah. So those 3 Tanoim all hold that the Ola that was at the foot of the Mount Sinai was an Olas Re'iyah. Beis Hillel, Rebbe Akiva, Rebbe Yossi Aglili, they went the other way. Kulu, Sfir Lahu, Ola Shikuv Yisrael, Midbar, Olas Tamid Havi. They hold it's an Olas Tamid. Again, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, we start our Mishnah. Beis Shammai says, which is more expensive, the Ola or the Re'iyah? The Ola. Why? Because it was also before Har Sinai and it's completely burnt up. Beis Hillel says, no, the Ola that was brought in by Har Sinai was not an Olas Re'iyah, it was an Olas Tamid. Since it was an Olas Tamid, the only thing I had before Har Sinai was a Shlomim, a Chagiga, therefore it's the more expensive one. So we've seen Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Comes Abaye and says that opinion that they argue about what the Ola was also a machlekes between, let's say, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and Rabbi Eliezer. We'll see. Beis Shammai, he says, Hada Amran. That we've already explained where Beis Shammai holds that. How do I know that Rabbi Shmuel holds this? Rabbi Shmuel, it's because it says in a brayso, in Tanya. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Klolos Nemra B'Sinai. Right? When the Torah was given, the general rules of the Torah were handed over to us on Har Sinai. Pratais, and the Pratais Nemru, Pratais Ba'al Mayit. Right? We had different, at points in time when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us more about the mitzvahs. Rabbi Shmuel's opinion is that we received the general rules by Har Sinai, and then the specifics came by Oyel Moed, which was later. And the point is, by the Chuvkas HaMishkan. Now the point is that means at Har Sinai we didn't have many details of how to do certain mitzvahs. So as it pertains to Karbonos, Rashi speaks this out. When it comes to the skinning of the Ola, Hefshet V'Nituach, we didn't even know that yet. That wasn't even something told to us. And many other details as well. So
the connection between Har Sinai to because Moshe Rabbeinu was continuously getting the Torah, or continuously as Hashem
could be. But it could be. But in terms of what we were provided with in terms of information from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you tell me that the Ola that was brought at the foot of Har Sinai was an Ola and it had all of the normal halachas of an Ola, according to Rabbi Shmuel, we weren't told yet about all these details. So that means the Ola that was brought at the foot of Har Sinai must have been done in sort of a somewhat limited way. It didn't have all of the normal halachas of an Ola because we weren't even told those halachas yet.
The details in Vayikra, right?
Yeah, basically the entire parsha of Teres Kayim.
So you could have said it was Torah about Moshe knew and they did it all, but he doesn't want to say that. He wants to say they didn't.
Correct.
Did we learn any halachas out from the part of the Torah right after Moshe Rabbeinu's death?
Oh, I'm not sure.
It doesn't have any halacha. It's just.
I'm sure there are tagia.
The 11
Could be there are drushes.
Yeah.
11 cookies in there.
It's clean.
You're clean.
Because if you say
We learn
that,
halachas from Sefer Yeshua. We learn halachas from the Nevi'im. So even though we say Yeshua wrote the Sukkim, you could learn halachas.
right, so then you can't say that the pratos that we're taught
He might be the best.
were taught after. You have to say that the pratos were the klalos were said then, and then the pratos were taught
No,
continually.
because we have two things: Torah Chasuma Nitna and Torah Megillah Nitna. You have to go into. We'll talk about it after.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to it.
You heard that? You heard of that? We'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're trying to work out over here the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, right? Remember, Abaye is telling us, guys, it's as it is, it's impossible. That doesn't work. Yeah. Rabbi Shmuel said, what did he say? Rabbi Shmuel said that the Torah was given at Har Sinai
Yeah.
in general, and then the specifics were given later by Almighty, which means that the Ola that was brought by Har Sinai was missing the details. We'll see that in a moment. Rabbi Akiva, who argues, he says no. Klolos upratais. Everything was given Namar B'Sinai. V'nishnu the oil mayad by the Mishkan. V'nishtalshlu ba'arvis mayad. And when we were hanging out in Dvarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah again, so basically we got a chazara of the Torah. Same thing. Whereas according to Rabbi Shmuel, the klolos were Namra B'Sinai, and the details were handed over a little later.
Ishmael is more mashing because how can you teach the entire Torah Kolos? I mean the Kolos and Pratos are saying all at Sinai. Sinai is what? 40 days?
What's the kasha?
Maybe a miracle.
It's not enough. You have to say it's an ace. They learn the entire Kolos and Pratos. It takes years.
Until this moment, you didn't think it was an ace that he went up to Har
That's
Sinai.
it.
No, I'm saying.
The thing is that
You understand? No. If they went up to Sinai is one thing. It's 100% it's an ace. But to say that you taught the entire Klal Yisrael, 600,000 men.
Kadosh Baruch is the greatest teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest teacher.
They're the same, but they didn't say. He didn't say that he said that Kadosh Baruch taught them the whole Torah.
That Hashem downloaded the program.
I hear.
It's a nice that Klal Yisrael learns all of Shas every 7 years, but they're not all listening. So many times.
So I think you don't say a nace when you don't have to. So you say
I don't think this is a scenario where we have to come on to anything practical. I mean, just because we can't understand how we could have been up there learning it for 40 days and 40 nights with our own mental capacity, it doesn't mean that.
we weren't up there. Moshe was up there.
Maybe I'm not understanding your question. Say your question again.
Every single person offered up a either Re'io or a Chagiga or a Tamid. For him to know the pratos means that he was taught. He said that the entire Torah was taught with this pratos,
Okay.
and the entire Torah was already taught in klalos.
Okay.
Right. So if you say that you taught the entire Torah with the pratos in that amount of time. Unless you go on to a nace, it's not possible.
How long do you think it took at Ohel Moed? 80 days. I mean, probably shorter period of time. Ohel Moed was less than 40 days.
Okay. Well, to clarify.
Saying by the Mishkan, right? The Torah was given again, so to speak, on some level. There's a machlokes as to when the Torah says it was given. When the Torah tells us it was given again. Whatever miracle you're going to come on to by Ohel Moed or Arvus Moav, I'm not asking a question on what you're saying. I'm just pointing out what would be an acceptable amount of time. 80 days, 120 days, 6 months, a year.
There's a lot.
I know. Okay, so I'm saying once you're bothered by the idea that we got the entire Kol Torah Kula in a specific period of time, then I want to go back to it. I'm losing guys.
So maybe we say we just got Mishnah and whatever.
Why would you say that?
Well, we obviously didn't get Gemara.
You're asking very complicated questions. Good questions. This that we got Gemara doesn't mean that we got these words, but the dinim of what's in the Gemara we certainly got.
Meaning the din that we would hold in the Mishnah.
Yeah,
the Gemara is just
the Gemara is just trying to flesh that out. That's fine.
Klalos.
Yeah.
Maybe it's much.
Klalos and pratos here means in terms of the specifics that were handed over. If I tell you that it says in the Torah. Where totafos? I don't know what totafos are. The only way the totafos would have been possible is if I was told the details.
Right.
Well, was I given the details or was I not given the details? What tefillin did they put on in Har Sinai, by Har Sinai? What tefillin did they put on? They were given Torah. Once they were given the Torah, they did put tefillin on.
Right.
So the question: so how much of the details of those tefillin? What were the tefillin looking like there? Did they have 4 compartments? So that's the discussion. Rabbi Shmuel is saying the general stuff was given. but maybe some of the specifics were not. Not maybe some of the specifics were not. Rabbi Akiva says no, everything was given. Everything, whatever we'll call everything. That's a discussion. What was given, what was not given is a longer, more complicated conversation because, like you say, maybe, was the Ramchal given?
No.
Okay, so what was given, what was not given is a big conversation. Certainly a big conversation. But whatever that big conversation is, Rabbi Akiva holds that was given entirely on Har Sinai. Rabbi Shmuel says no, only Taryag mitzvahs, let's say, was given. I'm not saying that specifically, but let's say Taryag mitzvahs were given with a general explanation of what you need to do. Go bring an Ola. Which Ola? That Ola's Re'iyah, or that Ola's Tamid.
Right.
Now, did it require Smicha? Did the Kabbalah Saddam from the thing require a Kli? Was there Hefshet Vinituach? Was there a specific direction that the animal needed to be cut in? Was the normal laws of Shechita applying in terms of the kind of that? It's clear that some of those details were not told over. We're assuming Hefshet Vinituach, which we'll see in the Gemara in a moment, was not given over.
Right.
The Gemara is therefore going to ask a kasha on Rabbi Shmuel. And we'll prove from that opinion that Rabbi Shmuel holds that the Ola that was given, that was brought by Har Sinai, was an Olas Tamid, not an Olas Real. Let's see it in Rabbi Akiva Omer no. Klalos upratos never b'Sinai v'nishna ba'ol moed v'nishtashlo b'arbas moed, meaning the same thing was given 3 times. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel holds it was given over partially in the beginning, and then it was finished off the second and third time. And if you're going to say that, like Beis Hillel, the Ola that was brought in the times of the Arba Sinai was an Ola that was an Olas Tamid and not an Olas Re'iyah. If it's an Olas Tamid, what does a Tamid mean? This is how I'm going to explain the Gemara. Olas Tamid means
Always.
it's the same day, every day, day in, day out, day in, day out. Are you telling me that the carbon Tamid that was brought by Har Sinai was formulated as A, B, and C, and in the end it became D, E, and F? That by definition is the opposite of what a Tamid is. Tamid, by definition, means the same, always the same. It's exact, meaning the consistency of the Tamid is what the carbon is. So how can you tell me that the Talmud that was brought by Har Sinai was different than the Talmud that we eventually brought for the rest of the years? The whole entire idea behind the Talmud is that it's the exact same thing, brought every time. So if you tell me like Rabbi Shmuel that there was a Torah given, and the Torah did not contain all the details, and all of those details were only filled in at some later point, and in between those 2 points in time, there was an Ola, and that Ola was an Ola's Talmud, it'll come out that we have 2 different Talmuds. There's the Talmud of before, and there's the Talmud of after. Well, then by definition, that's not a Talmud. That's why I'm explaining the Gemara. Different Rishonim explain it a little bit different, but that's fundamentally the question. So therefore, it must be Rabbi Shmuel holds that the carbon that was brought by Har Sinai was not a Tamid; it was the Olas Re'iyah, like Beis Shammai.
So Kevin, you said this. You gave us a little treat 2 minutes ago. You told us this.
Which didn't.
This one, you said.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Rabbi Lazar de Tanya, so his third opinion over here. Abaye said that Rabbi Lazar holds that the carbon that was for the Ola that was brought by Har Sinai at the foot of the mountain was not an Olas Tamid; it was rather an Olas Re'iyah. The Tanya. Olas Tamid ha'asuya b'Har Sinai. The pasuk by Olas Tamid says that it was asuya b'Har Sinai. Rabbi Lazar Omer ma'aseha nemra b'Sinai. Its actions were mentioned at Har Sinai. However, v'hi atzma loy karva. It was not brought until later. Meaning, what was the Ola at Har Sinai? Not a Tamid, but rather it was a carbon Re'iyah. So those are the 3 opinions that hold that it was a Re'iyah, not a Tamid. That's Beis Shammai, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Eliezer. That's what Abaye said. Now, what about the opinions of Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who hold that the Ola that was brought by Har Sinai was an Olas Tamid, not an Olas Re'iyah, right? So, Zot Gemara, Beis Hillel, we don't even have to say it, right? Ad Amar, we already mentioned Beis Hillel. Rabbi Akiva Omer, where do we see his opinion? Sorry?
Did
I jump ahead a little bit?
You did jump ahead.
I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar Omer Ma'aseh Nam Rabbi Sina V'hi Atzma Lekarva. The machlekes between Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Akiva Omer. Karva v'shuvlei paski. He holds no that the carbon that was brought then was an Olas Tamid, and once it started then with Rabbi Akiva. It makes sense because Rabbi Akiva said earlier that he has Hefshet Vinituach, so the entire Tamid could always be the same. Okay. Therefore, it's fine. Elamani Mekayim. There's a problem now. According to Rabbi Akiva, there's a little bit of a complicated question, but we'll say it simple. Elamani Mekayim. There's a separate pasuk. The pasuk says, Hazvachim umincha higashtem li bamidbar arboim shana beis Yisrael, meaning it was a betmiya that was asked in, was it Amos? Amos, yeah. So Hashem was basically saying in a question language, basically saying it's almost as if you didn't bring zvachim and minchas for the 40 years. It's mashma that no karbanos were brought, so it's a question on, again, You have to. It's a little bit difficult. I don't have a good explanation for why this is only a question on Rabbi Akiva, and let's say not on the Rebbe Eliezer. But either way, he answers Shvata Shalevi Shalayavdava Dezara Heini Kriva Isa. This Olas Tamid that was brought wasn't being brought by everyone else because they had done the Chet Egel, which is what Amos is referring to. But since Shevet Levi didn't do that, it could be their money that went towards the. Basically, the difference is I think it has to do with the money. An Olas Tamid was funded by the communal money, but an Olas Re'iyah was everyone his own individual. So an Olas
was
Re'iyah
every
would be a
single day,
problem.
every single day
Every
in the
single
base on the Mizbeach.
Yes. So even by Har Sinai they brought a Tamid. That Tamid had to be communal money. That problem is
That was from Machzah Shekel. What was it from?
Exactly, Machzah Shekel. So that money had to be communal money. Well, if that money was communal money, that means it came from the people who were chote with the Chet Egel. That can't be because it says in Amos that Hashem never took a carbon from the people who brought the Chet Egel. So he explains you're right. What it means is it came from the money from Shevet Alevi. You don't do a Chet Egel. That's how he explains. But anyway, that's the opinion of Rebbe Eliezer. So you see Rebbe Eliezer.
What was Rebbe Akiva was what was his opinion that was unique? It was
In this opinion over here, he held that the carbon Talmud was brought at Har Sinai, and it would never stop from that point on.
So he's saying because of Chet Egel, we know that there was inconsistency.
The Chet Egel question was: it says in Amos that Hashem never took a carbon from the people who did the Chet Egel, and yet here he's saying that he did take a Talmud, which means it was funded. So he answers no, it was funded by Shevet Alevi, not from the rest of them. Fine, okay, that was Abaye's three opinions in Beis Shammai, Rebbe Eliezer, and Bishmal. Beis Hillel, he said Beis Hillel and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yosef Glili held that the carbon was a carbon Olas Tamid. Beis Hillel had the Amron that we saw earlier. Beis Hillel is of the opinion that it was a carbon Tamid, so we know that he holds that opinion. Rabbi Akiva also Hanami da Amron. We said just a minute ago that he said that the Tamid that was brought at the foot of Har Sinai was a Tamid. Whereas Rabbi Yosef Glili, we don't know. Rabbi Yosef Glili the Tanya. The Brisa says Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer Shalosh. We brought this Brisa many times already. Shalosh mitzvahs nitzavu Yisrael ba'alosam l'regel. 3 mitzvahs Klal Yisrael was given when they left. Not when they left. Sorry, when they're supposed to go up to.
Have to make all Geffen right now.
If you had enough, yeah. Shalosh mitzvahs nitzavu Yisrael ba'alosam l'regel. When we go up to every yontiv, we have 3 mitzvahs. What are the 3 mitzvahs? Re'iyah, the carbon re'iyah, v'chagiga, and the carbon chagiga, v'simcha. Now here's is it mashma that simcha here is a mitzvah? Is simcha here? I'm saying simcha a carbon, and simcha is tov, and simcha is yantiv. Does re'iyah mean the carbon re'iyah? Does it also mean aliyah l'regel?
Shalmi simcha.
Shalmi simcha. Okay, so it's touching it over there. What is that? A chavrus? What's what safer is that?
Oh, it's
Simple, right?
This guy's bad.
I don't really know what that is.
I know he's new, but it's phenomenal.
Oh, the Sefta Brewer is a shortened Mesivta.
Oh, it is.
It
Unbelievable.
just takes away some stuff from the back. His Sefta Brewer is excellent.
Yeah?
The Mesivta is excellent.
Oh, okay. I'll check it out. It's good, and it has a bunch of
on the
masechtas.
spot.
Yeah.
It's similar to the Steinsaltz, but a little
more detailed.
Yeah.
Everything else is on one page. You're never like.
I like that.
That's what happened to me.
That's why I use the Steinsaltz.
I'm like,
I might pick that up. Check it
I'm
out.
a big fan of Sefta Brewer and Mesivta. It's just I have
Yeah.
Steinsaltz is more original though.
Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer Shalosh mitzvahs obviously about listen the regular. The 3 mitzvahs. What are the mitzvahs? Re'iyah v'chagiga v'simcha. And he says the following statement, and each one of them are unique from the other two. Yesh b're'iyah she'en b'shteim, yesh b'chagiga she'en b'shteim, yesh b'simcha she'en b'shteim. Let's go through that. Yesh b're'iyah, the carbon re'iyah has something that the other ones don't have. She'en b'shteim, which is what? She'ha ola kula l'gavoa. It's the only one of the 3 that's a carbon ola. Ma'she'en kin b'shteim. The other ones are chagigas, therefore they're not completely burnt. They're not chagigas, they're shlomim, therefore they're not completely burnt. Yesh b'chagiga, the carbon chagiga has something, ma'she'en b'shteim, that the other ones don't have. Right? Shechagiga yeshna lifnei hadibur. Mashe ein b'shtein. Here's the punchline for us, right? Because according to this opinion, this will only be true if the ola that was before it was an olas tamid. If it was an olas riyah, then this would not be true. Therefore, you see, Rabbi Yosef Glili must hold that the carbon ola that was brought at the foot of Har Sinai was an olas tamid, not an olas riyah. Yesh b'simcha mashe ein b'shtein. What simcha have that the other two don't have? Shah simcha, meaning when you bring a shalmei simcha, lo heges ba'anashim uvenashim, which is very interesting. Because does a woman have a chiyuv to bring the carbon simcha, or does she just have a chiyuv to eat from the carbon that the husband brings? That's not clear. But either way, mashein b'shteim, the other ones, a woman is not chayiv in riyah or chagiga, right? So you see, Rabbi Yosef Glili holds that. Okay, so that's the opinion of Abaye. Remember, Beis Shammai, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shmuel hold that the carbon was an olas riyah. Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yosef Glili hold that the carbon was an olas tamid. Rabbi Shmuel, my taima kamuk masleke Beis Shammai. What raya do you have that Rabbi Shmuel holds like Beis Shammai, meaning that the ola was an olas Sorry, Olas Riyah. Because Isal Kedaitach, Ola Shekrivi Yisrael B'Midbar, Olas Tamid Have, Mi Ika Mida Demi Karla Boy Hashef Vinituach, Uvla Sai Boy Hashef Vinituach. Meaning, the Gemara is quoting the earlier proof of Rabbi Shmuel. How do I know Rabbi Shmuel holds that it's an Olas Riyah? Because it can't be that I have inconsistency in my carbon Talmud, that the one that was brought at the foot of Har Sinai did not have Hafshek Vinituach, and every one of them afterwards did have Hafshek Vinituach.
Yeah.
So ask the Gemara, if that's your whole hechrech, then you have the same problem that Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Omar Ola Shekrivi Yisrael B'Midbar Olas Tamid Have. You said just 2 seconds ago that he holds it's in Olas Tamid, and he proved it from the fact that it was Re'iyah was unique in that it wasn't before the Dibur, which means that the Ola that was by Har Sinai was an Olas Tamid, and yet we did 1 second, I lost the spot. And yet he also holds that the Talmud that existed on Har Sinai, right, was without Hefshed V'Nituach, and the one that was after did have Hefshed V'Nituach. So your whole hechrech, your whole push by Rabbi Shmuel is that there needs to be consistency. And Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who held that the Talmud by Har Sinai, the Ola was a Talmud, did not have consistency. Meaning, so that entire premise that you use to make Rabbi Shmuel like Rabbi Eliezer and Beis Shammai, that the Ola was an Olas Riyah, is not really there. And how do I know the Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds it?
He says it.
He says it in a second.
Right.
The Tanya, the Brisa says Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Oimer, Oila Shigris Midbar Eina Tu and a Hefshed V'Nituach, Lefisha Ein Hefshed V'Nituach, Elami Oil Moed Ve'elech. He has this interesting opinion, and he holds that you can't have Hefshed V'Nituach until after Oil Moed. Sounds like he holds, like Rabbi Shmuel, that the details weren't given until Oil Moed, until later. And yet he holds, we were Moichiach, that the Re'iyah is different than the Simcha and the Chagiga, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, which means what? That it was uniquely given before Har Sinai. Sorry, the Chagiga was the one that was before Har Sinai, and the Re'iyah wasn't, meaning it must be that the carbon there was an Olas Tamid. Now, you don't even need to come on to it. Really, the Gemara could have brought this Brisa as a raya that Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that the Ola Shekrivi Yisrael B'Midbar was an Olas Tamid. He says it before in the Brisa.
Right.
He just, in the same breath that he would say it, he would be upgeschlagen Rabbi Shmuel's hechrech from before. So the Gemara didn't want to do it. The Gemara said, Sami Mikan Rabbi Shmuel, take him out. Meaning right here, Rabbi Shmuel, from Abaye's statement that Beis Shammai, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Shmuel are of the opinion that the carbon was an Olas Re'iyah, take him out. So really, La'olam, what he's saying is that I have no hechrech for Rabbi Shmuel at all, right? And really, I know Beis Shammai and Rabbi Eliezer hold that the carbon Ola was an Olas Re'iyah. I know that Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi Aglili hold it's an Olas Tamid, and I don't know about Rabbi Shmuel. He says, take it out from Abaye's statement. We must have not had the correct Messiah on what Abaye had said. By Rabbi Chiz, the postscript over here, Hai Kra Hechiksiv, the following pasuk, how do you read it? Meaning this pasuk was the pasuk we've been quoting all throughout the daf today. This is the pasuk that's going to be spoken out like this. Pasuk says, this is the pasuk of the Shlomim and the Olos by Har Sinai. Vayishlach es na'arei b'nei Yisrael v'ya'alu Olos. The next word is not part of the pasuk. Kivasim is the Gemara's attempt to try to explain what it means. That the Olos, what were the Olos? Were the Olos Kivasim, sheep, or were the Olos parim? And we'll see how to read it. Meaning, if you look at the pasuk reads normally as follows: Vayishlach es na'arei b'nei Yisrael v'ya'alu Olos v'yizbechu zvachim shlomim la'Hashem parim. So it says in the pasuk, the only mention of an animal in this pasuk is the parim, the cows, and it mentions in the pasuk Ola and Shlomim. So is the understanding that the only animal mentioned in this pasuk is referring to both of the karbanos that are being discussed, or is the olos to be understood to be a different animal? And the Gemara is suggesting kvasim. Why kvasim? Because normally an ola is from a keves, right? Odilmano, idi v'idi parim have it. Maybe they're both parim.
Because the word parim's out of place.
Out of place completely, yeah. It's almost as if there's a semicolon at the end of the pasuk that says everything happened until now, parim. Or no, do we say that parenthetically there's an implicit statement that the ola is of course kvasim because they're normally kvasim. So on that the Gemara says Lamainaf Kamina, who cares? It's what happened at the times of they did it. We're never doing it again. So what's the difference?
Funny thing is we ask questions about
all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
You could always ask them
all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Marzutra Amar Lepisuk Tamim. He says, what do you mean? I need to know how to read the laning. Meaning depending upon if where the comma is, right? Meaning if you look at the pasuk, what does it say? V'yishlach es na'arei b'nei Yisrael v'ya'alu olos, comma, or asnachta. If you say that kivasim, then you say an asnachta. And then the next line is a completely separate phrase. Whereas if you say that it's not kvasim, that parim is going back on everything, then you put the asnachta somewhere else. That's Mar Sutra's understanding of the nafkamina. Meaning, really, there's no nafkamina in terms of karbanos, but there's a halachic in Hilchos Kriya Sefer Torah.
Do we read this pasuk twice?
It's a good question. I don't know how we pass game. I guess we'll. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we definitely don't read it twice. But I'm saying the question: how do we read it?
We could look.
Yeah, that we can figure it. We'll take open up a question. Rav Achim Rei the Rav Amar Lo Oimer Harei Alai Oil. This is the classic example. Very often in Rishonim you see this. But Lo Oimer Harei Alai Oil Ke'oil Shekriv Yisrael B'Midbar Mai. Meaning, let's say someone makes a neder and says, "I want to bring up this neder, and I want it to be exactly like the oil they brought at the foot of Har Sinai." Well, now all of a sudden I need to know what they did. Meaning, you're right. I don't need to know what they did for historical purposes because there's no relevant halacha for that. And besides laning and anasnachta, I don't care either. But if a person decides, I mean, you see this, Tosfos does this all the time to get out of problems. What's the nafkamina of this Gemara? What do you mean? If I make a neder that it's true, then I need to know if it's true. If it's not true, then it's not true.
Whatever Tosfos does, he never makes up. He finds a Gemara in Shas that does it, and then he says, "Let's."
And on that, I'm happy Kalman's not here because he doesn't like the answer to the Gemara. So he says, "I might parim havi akfasim havi." Gemara says tekel. We don't know.
He doesn't like tekel.
He doesn't like tekels. Okay. Either way, we'll hold there. What a day.
Okay. Wow.